With that, previous guest writes the first question. So you have the envelope, sir. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Let's check it out. Okay. What was the one action you took during your transition that had the highest ROI, return on investment, right? Okay. Well,
was there just one?
Probably not just one. I mean, I know we're going to get into it. I think I had a lot of luck, but a lot of like planning went into my transition, so it went pretty well. But I think the one thing I could point to was trusting a close friend and his judgment in what I should be doing next. Truly set me up for success.
Now, you mentioned that your planning was already pretty much squared away and combined with a little bit of luck, but that old saying of luck is just, the byproduct of good preparation and planning.
Right.
Did you have what you would call mentors in place as far as guiding you through your transition?
I don't know if I had well, I guess I did. I had mentors. I mean, I had my parents, family members, some friends that had already been out. I think some peers that were going through it at the same time, so we'd bounce, great ideas off each other, whether they were great or not. And so I think I was fortunate in that aspect. I mean, I was pretty senior in my career, so a lot of folks that I knew had already transitioned out. So, those were the folks that I kind of leaned on, took some advice from. Interesting environment when you're kind of that senior. There's not anybody around you still kind of in uniform that's helping so much as the ones that are already, had gone through it.
Now, from the opposite side of that, though, as you rose up in rank, because you ended up retiring as a colonel?
Colonel, yeah, in 06, yeah.
Do you get to a point, though, when you get that high up that obviously the numbers start falling off because there's less and less of you at those senior ranks?
Right.
But at the same token, is the people who are leaving still frequent, or is it every so often? So where you're really not getting a good barometer of people leaving. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I would imagine if you're down lower level, especially at the listed level, you got people literally in and out all the time.
Yeah, I don't think it's that much different at the officer level. Obviously, so I retired nearly at 30 years, 06, full colonel. I was a special operations guy, so that's so my community gets smaller and smaller, right? In terms of who I'm talking to and who I was around. And you would see like cohorts of friends and colleagues, peers, subordinates, superiors that were getting out at different chunks of time, right? So it felt consistent that way in terms of, but towards the end, to your point, there was only a few folks that were still at my rank that were like my year group. We started about the same time. We'd been through the same experiences. It was just a handful of folks. So you were just, you didn't have a lot like support, I guess, at my level going through the same thing at the same time. I had one other friend, and he actually was a couple years younger than me. His path was a little bit different. We just ended up being at the same unit at the same time, both kind of getting out at the same time. So we would bounce ideas and talk to each other about things. But for the most part, most of like the people I would have called my peers, they were mostly gone. And then there was a handful that were moving up, right? And the ones that were moving up, they did, very busy. They're going to be general officers. They had, or were general officers, that they were, their life was much different now than what I was dealing with. And then the folks that I kind of gone through the service together, there was only a handful that had just recently got out. It was, 2 or 3, 4 years, and, a lot changes just in a year or 2 years, right? So it was, so there was a little bit of that feeling that you're kind of going through it alone at that way.
Staying on your career a little bit right now, Was there not the interest in going general officer and keep going for you?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But the Army has to have the same interest in you that you have in it, right? So, I had a couple good looks. I had a couple good opportunities. Again, in the special operations community, I was a Green Beret, special forces guy. Usually it's anywhere from 1 to maybe 3 of those guys in a year group would get promoted to general officer in 1 year. It's normally 1 or 2. Because the Army's a big place and we're a very small part of it. So I had some great opportunities. I had 2 commands as a full colonel. Neither one of them were a special forces unit. Well, one was a unit, but it's Green Beret group, special forces group. So when I compared myself to my peers, I knew that it was kind of a long shot. I stayed in. I was hoping for it. My wife would say that she was happy that it didn't pan out. A lot of stress at that, rank, a lot of, other things going on. It was more time away from home, all those things that she'd been dealing with for 30 years. So I think it probably all worked out for the best for me. There's a part of me that, when things are heating up, things are going on, I'd probably love to be a part of it still, but, no, I can't. I have no regrets in terms of how it turned out. But yeah, I would be lying if I didn't say I wanted to be a general officer.
The one friend that gave you that piece of advice, also a veteran or civilian?
No, he's a veteran, and we had served together. When he was a major, I was a major. He was a captain. He was an intel officer. I was a company commander in a special forces battalion. We did a rotation to Afghanistan together. He's actually the guy that started the nonprofit that I work for now. And I got involved very early while I was still on active duty. And he was the guy that's like, hey, I know exactly what you should be doing.
Have I got a plan for you?
I have a plan for you. And I trusted him with it. I thought I had a few ideas of what I wanted to do next. But, he was dead set. He's like, no, I think this is going to work out great for you. So far, it's been a couple of years, but he's been absolutely right. So, yeah.
Well, before we keep going deeper into that aspect of your career, let's take you backwards.
Sure.
I'd like to talk about where you grew up, where's hometown, kind of what molded you into the young man who went into the Army.
Yeah. So born and raised in Yakima, Washington. So if you know Washington State, most people think about Seattle, Washington, evergreen trees, a lot of rain, all that kind of stuff. Washington's separated by the Cascade Mountains. You get to the east side of that, you kind of hit high desert that's all farmland, relatively flat. You get some rivers, some rolling hills. So Yakima is a big agricultural area. I was born there. My dad was a prosecuting attorney. He was the district attorney there for 26 years. And I was the youngest of 4 children. So had an amazing childhood growing up in Yakima. Loved every minute of it. Was introduced to the service through my father. My dad was an ROTC cadet when he was in college, went to Gonzaga University. Became an infantry officer and then served in Vietnam. After his time in Vietnam, his time was up in terms of what he owed the service for his college. And he decided to return to Gonzaga to go to law school, and then has had this incredible career, as a public servant, as a lawyer. But he had in our house his commissioning certificate to second lieutenant, all the way up through, a couple, the one for first lieutenant as well was hanging up, some other stuff, memorabilia from Vietnam. He never spoke much about his time in the service, but nothing negative. He actually is the sole surviving son of a World War II veteran. So never met his father, my grandfather, a guy named Roy Cunningham. Roy was a B-24 pilot in World War II. He was in the China-Burma theater, and he was shot down actually in the Bay of Haiphong, which later my dad goes to Vietnam, so it's kind of like seeing karma there. Yeah, weird circle. But he was shot down, lost, MIA, KIA, about a week before my dad was born.
Oh,
so
wow.
They never met each other. But my dad adopted when he was about 1 year old by Joe Sullivan. That's the guy who I called Grandpa my whole life. He served in World War II in the Army. My mom's dad served in the Navy in World War II. And then my mom's grandfather, my great-grandfather, served in World War I. So I had these stories of history of service. Nobody made it a career, but it was all something that was kind of in the family DNA that, was something that was, that we did. My older brother had looked at the academies, but then he ended up going to Claremont McKenna College. It's just not too far away from here. Both my sisters did the same. And then I looked at both academies, thought I was going to be a Top Gun pilot because, of course, the movie, growing up watching that, but then decided, no, I'll follow my brother and sister's footsteps, go to Claremont as well. Small school, Division III sports. I got recruited to play football there and went, and with no, at that point, intention, I thought my opportunity to serve in the military that had passed.
Now, what was it that turned you away from the academies?
Well, just brutally honest.
When it comes to sunglasses, first responders and military members definitely don't baby them. They get dropped, thrown in a utility pocket, or tossed in gear bags. Frontline Optics was created for that reality. You get premium eye protection without paying designer brand prices for something that won't survive your lifestyle. From polarized UV 400 lenses to anti-reflective coatings and water repellent finish. And here's where Frontline Optics separates themselves from the pack. When life happens and your glasses break, they offer a no questions asked replacement program, even for prescription lenses. On top of that, Frontline Optics was founded by a firefighter, and a portion of every purchase goes to support the First Responders Children's Foundation, helping families of those who gave everything. So if you're looking for sunglasses that look good and come from a company that actually understands the job, visit frontlineoptics.com and use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your purchase. Frontline Optics, from a first responder for the front lines.
I came down here and visited multiple times. My brother was on the basketball team and football team. One of my two sisters played basketball. Claremont's just this awesome community of 5 colleges. It's in a beautiful spot.
What year are we talking about?
So my brother graduated in, say, 80. Here. So I graduated in 94. The younger of my two sisters graduated in 90.
So the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. So late 80s, early 90s. And just being exposed to that environment, it just, in Southern California, being a Washington kid, it's kind of like, man, that'd be a really cool place to go to college. So, and I was into sports, and I wasn't I was a pretty good athlete, but I wasn't going to go play, anything, Division I or anything like that. So the fact that I knew I could continue to play sports and go to a really good school, is why I got pulled in this direction.
Were you thinking military though when you went to college?
No, I actually did. I started the whole process to look at both, like getting an appointment either to West Point, to the military academy, or to the Naval Academy. Started kind of going through that process when I was a junior in high school, and literally it was the lure of California. I was like, I think I'd just rather do that instead.
For nobody who's been to the area, Claremont is gorgeous. And that whole area
it's amazing.
There of Southern California, because I spent 20 years of my career in Glendora. So Claremont was almost literally next door.
Yeah. And then my brother, like when he first got out, was living in Huntington Beach,
Oh, okay.
So it was just like,
it only gets better.
Yeah, it only gets better, right? So it's just like, I think that's the place for me.
Did you go to ROTC right away?
No, I didn't. So that's the kind of crazy thing. So I came down, went to school, and I had a good friend who was an ROTC cadet. So I was aware that there was an ROTC program. It's really small at Claremont. They actually have a bunch of schools that kind of satellite together, and they come together for it's kind of all housed there.
Don't they basically have to do the same thing for their football team? They're not known as a football school.
No, not really. Well, they're much better now than they used to be. Like when I was there, not a football school. Now they actually usually do pretty well and have a winning season now. But no, the way it's set up is 2 of the schools, Pomona and Pitzer, get together for athletics, and then Claremont and Harvey Mudd get together for men's athletics, and then they bring in the women's college scripts for Claremont Mudd scripts for the women's athletics. So yeah, they pull together, and it's a unique environment because that's your cross-street rival. You go to class with some of these folks and then play, a football game against them on Saturday. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, it was my sophomore year. At that point, I still was trying to like figure out what am I going to do. Of course, I was like, I'm just going to be like my dad. I'm going to go to law school. I'll take, so I was a government history major. And a letter came in the mail and everyone got it. Every sophomore got it at Claremont that the school had secured a 2-year ROTC scholarship. And all I had to do, or whoever had to do, was say you were going to sign up. They were going to send you to Fort Knox, Kentucky for a truncated like basic training, where you would be in basic training barracks, drill sergeants, the whole deal. And that would get you up to speed so you could go into your junior year at the same kind of like level of understanding of, what the ROTC cadets are at. So just spend your summer in lovely Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Nice and mild weather.
Yeah. So I got it and I was like, man, I think this is my opportunity to do what I thought I was going to do. Like, it'll give me 4 years to figure it out. Again, I'm thinking of my dad as my mentor. I'll do those 4 years. Then I'll go to law school. This will give me time to like really figure out life. Army will probably be good for me. Didn't tell my parents. Went over to the ROTC department. I figured I'm an adult now. I can do what I want. Go over to the ROTC department. I was the only person at the Claremont colleges that responded to that recruitment letter. So they're like, if you make it through, the scholarship's yours. There was other people that were going to Fort Knox and they were competing top cadets to get a scholarship. They're like, we've already secured one, so all you got to do is make it through. Don't get hurt. Don't get kicked out. Don't quit.
So are you technically the first graduate of their ROTC program?
No. They've had an ROTC program for a very long time.
Okay.
Claremont started as a men's college in the late 40s. And basically you had a bunch of World War II like veterans that came to this brand new school, had a very big ROTC department at that point. So the history of the ROTC department is as old as the school. It's just got smaller and smaller over time.
I was going to say, because it's a liberal school that's known for producing military.
No, it's a liberal arts college. It was pretty conservative when I was there. It's kind of changed in terms of that these days. But the
education-wise, though, it's a great school.
Oh, it's one of the top, 10 liberal arts colleges in the United States. Usually, when the report comes out from U.S. News World Report, Pomona, the cross street rival, is usually a little bit ahead of us. It's always this thing back and forth. Harvey Mudd, which is a tech, it's a technical school. It's like the Caltech of Southern California. Like, these guys are geniuses. Had a couple friends that were cadets up there. So it's a really interesting environment that you kind of find yourself in, and very few folks are like, oh, I'm going to join the Army with this very expensive education I just got. Most people are going to law school.
Mom and Dad,
they're being accountants. They're doing other things. So I went for it. I called my parents once they said I was, accepted, and I was, my dad was excited. He thought that would be really good for me. He thought that was a good path to take. My mom was not happy at all.
So between the two of them, you got about a middle.
Yeah. Yeah. She was pretty upset. I mean, and in hindsight, she's the wife of a Vietnam veteran. She had gone through like the worst of what could happen for someone that was an ROTC graduate who's a brand new officer, so that's, her perception was like, he just signed up to go to war. I was just like, oh, they're going to pay for the last 2 years of school. It's going to reduce my student loans. I'll get 4 years to figure out life. This is going to be perfect for me. My dad.
Now, was the commitment after graduation 4 years?
It was still 4 years. So it was only a 2-year scholarship, but it was still the same 4-year commitment. Yeah. And I was on the same path as the rest of the ROTC cadets where, I could put in that I wanted to go active duty, reserve, or National Guard, so.
For that program, Army was the only option for you?
I don't know if it still exists. The Air Force had an ROTC detachment at Pitzer College, I think, oddly enough, no. They satellited out because I had a friend who was Air Force ROTC as well. Those were the two options. Not only Claremont and Harvey Mudd and Scripps were those three schools accepted ROTC scholarships. Pomona and Pitzer, if you wanted to be an ROTC cadet, you could be one, but they weren't going to accept your scholarship. It was kind of the politics of those two schools being a little bit more liberal leaning in the liberal arts. And I actually had two friends that graduated from Pomona that were in our ROTC department. They were on a path to like medical school and wanted to be doctors in the Army, so that's why they were in the ROTC program.
How was that summer in Kentucky?
It was good. I enjoyed it. I mean, I went into it. My dad was like, hey, you've played team sports your entire life. He goes, essentially, you're going to, I mean, he was, when he had, some perspective as a second lieutenant, graduated his basic course at Fort Benning as an infantry officer, didn't get orders right away. So he got attached to a basic training kind of, and back then AIT, advanced training company where he was running some ranges and things. So he had experienced drill sergeants from like that side of it. And he's like, okay, drill sergeants. He goes, they're basically the worst football coach you've ever had. He goes, they want you to succeed, but they are going to make it hard for you every single day. He goes, you just do exactly what they say, try to do it better than everybody else, and then help everybody else also succeed. If you do those, so you just be a good teammate, right? He's like, just treat it like it's a team sport. Just pay attention. He goes, you're going to screw up. Don't make the same mistake twice. Like, that's the advice my dad gave me, so went into it like that. And actually, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed being out in the woods, all the things that we were doing. It was very much that environment, I tried to game the system because you only have so much time between things. And I was like, if you don't actually, you can close your padlock on your footlocker.
Latching it?
It latches, but if you don't spin it, all you got to do is pull it and you can get right back in it really fast. Like, I was the first guy to ever figure that out at basic training. I came back, all my stuff's like all over the bay. Things like that happened all the time. So you learn those mistakes, don't make them twice. So I enjoyed it. It was an interesting environment because you did have a group of, it was weird because you had a few like myself that knew if we just made it, we had a scholarship. You had some other folks that are like, I need this to get my, to pay for the last 2 years of my school. So this is why I chose it. A few others that were just doing it because they just thought, I'm going to do the military thing. Oddly enough, you hadn't signed like an actual like enlistment with the Army. It was until you finished, right? And that's the way it was for ROTC. Then you commit that you're going to go into the service, the last 2 years of college. Same thing happens like at West Point and stuff. You can do the first 2 years, then you got to do your commitment. So it's weird because we had a couple of we had 2 female cadets that showed up, no intention of joining the Army, but their sororities were going to kick them out if they didn't go to ROTC basic training and make it through as a punishment. So they both made it. It was weird. They had no intention. It drove the drill sergeants crazy because they knew what the story was. Yeah, it was a weird environment. I don't know. I don't even know if they still have that program in the Army. I mean, it was awesome for me, though. And it was cool. You go to Fort Knox, Kentucky. If you're a kid of, the 80s, you watch Stripes, and that's where it was filmed. And like the basic training barracks were like right there. You did the same obstacle course as John there? Candy. The motorhome was not there and was upset. But so I had a good time. Yeah.
Coming back and now finishing up the 2 years back in Claremont. Was there a mindset shift for you at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely, right? And so, because you're getting it up for us, we had mandatory physical training 3 times a week. I was on the football team. People said I had it a little bit easier because the defensive back coach was one of our cadre that taught, the juniors. But it was interesting because my mentality was built out of the crucible of drill sergeants, like making me an Army, right? And I was bought in. I was a true believer. I came back to a bunch of juniors who had spent 2 years at Claremont College kind of doing ROTC. So I was like, everything had to be dress right dress. The cadets they gave me, the sophomores and juniors to be in my little fire team, my squad. Like I was like, you guys are going to be here early. So they started to give me like any of the problem cadets, the freshmen, they're like, give them to Sullivan. They'll either quit or they'll get straight because he's taking this way too serious. I had like cadre, like you can dial it back a little bit. You're not at basic training still. And I was like, well, that's all I know.
The dilemma of giving somebody a little bit of power.
Yeah. So I had a couple freshmen that did not like me where I would call them at like 5 a.m. on PT days. They're like, are you up yet? They're like, PT isn't for another hour and a half. I was like, you've been late the last 2 times.
Do I need to come and get you?
I'm going to call you in 15 minutes. He's like, don't call me in 15 minutes. My roommate is not in ROTC. He hates me right now. I was like, then don't show up late to PT.
Because you're talking about an era where the phone was still on the wall, so it was ringing.
Oh, it was ringing.
House.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no cell phones. Yeah. So, but yeah, I enjoyed the last 2 years. It was great. Again, very small group of people. Like in my class at the Claremont colleges, we had the satellite group where we would get together, come down to Pendleton to do our exercises and things like that. We only had 5 people between the 3 colleges. We had one Harvey Mudd graduate, 2 from Pomona, and then me and another guy were from Claremont. So real small group of people. They were all going off to medical school after I was going straight. I got field artillery was my branch, so I was going to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to shoot cannons. But it was excellent.
Did you get to pick that, or were you told that?
So no, you get before your senior year or at your senior year, you go to what they call advanced camp, as I think it still exists. It's called advanced camp anymore, but you go now. It's all at Fort Knox still. It used to be 2 back then. I went to Fort Lewis, and they bring all the ROTC cadets there. They put you through this summer training, and they grade you. And based on your grade there, your grades from your ROTC classes, and then your GPA, that ranks you in the U.S. Army of who's going active duty if they want to go active duty, who's going to be a reserve officer, who's going reserve. You could be a reserve active officer for and then get your active duty commission later. And then once you get through that kind of wicket, it was, okay, you're going active. What was your top 10 choices for branch? And the branches kind of take, if you're number one. My number one was infantry. My number 2 was actually military police. Oh, I'm going to go to law school. This will probably help me learn about the law. This is how, had no idea what military police did, so and then number 3 was field artillery. So I was a pretty good cadet, not the greatest student. I think that's what put me down to number 3. So I ended up going to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to fire, cannons and be a field artillery officer.
How soon after graduation were you there?
About a month later. So graduated mid-May, and then the first week of June, pulling into Fort Sill to start officer basic training. Any
apprehension in that last 2 years of actually going active duty, or were you excited for it?
I was excited for it. I mean, I was a little nervous. What did I get myself into? As I'm seeing my friends get these really good jobs, they're all staying in Southern California.
Your brother's in Huntington Beach.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, man, did I make the right choice? I loved it, so I thought it was the right way to go. And again, being a team sport guy and stuff is this is my thing. I like being around other people that are doing hard things together. So I thought and then I got to Fort Sill, made a whole bunch of new friends right away, and we were off, learning and.
But your plan at that point was still, hey, I'm just going to do my 4 years.
4 years. I'm going to get out, and I pretty much thought I was going to, I'll take the LSATs and go to law school.
So that would have been 94 to 98?
Yep. Graduated in 1994. Figured I'd be out around 1998.
When did it change for you?
Pretty well. A couple of things changed. So while I was at my officer basic course, I met my wife through a friend that I actually went to school at Claremont with down in Texas. She was teaching in Dallas, Texas. I went down for a weekend. Boys, met her. 3 weeks later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. Seems to be working out. It's been 31 years. So immediately I was like, okay, I'm getting married soon. So that happened. So when I got married, I have a son. She had previously been married. So my oldest son was 5 when we got married. So I had a family, right? And as crazy as it sounds, the Army provides you a lot of stability, right? So so there was that to consider. And then once I got out into the force, doing my first job, I just absolutely fell in love with it. I seemed to excel at what I was doing. I had a lot of, superior officers and mentors and folks that are like, you're really good at this. So, I saw a lot of success early on in terms of like, I think I could do this for a while.
Where'd you go for your first duty assignment?
Well, luckily for me, I was like close to home. I went to Fort Lewis, Washington. So I was up in Fort Lewis. And oddly enough, since I was in a mechanized unit, the only place to train was at the Yakima Training Center. So we would drive hours over the mountains to get all our stuff over there. And we'd go over there for like 60 to 90 days to train out on the ranges out there and do everything that we did. My parents had actually bought like a small ranch right off the training center. So I was like the coolest lieutenant because we could like, when we got to go back to the Cantonment area, I'd grab my guys, we'd go get pizza and go swimming at my parents' pool. So I was like an all-star. But oddly enough, I joined the Army to see the world and I went right back to Yakima, Washington. But had a blast. It was an incredible time while we were there. And at that point, I thought, hey, I'm going to be a field artilleryman for life. This is a great life. Decided to do something different, and this was what set me up for success later. But wanted to go to one of the maneuver advanced courses. And back then, you could go to the armor advanced course or the infantry advanced course. And I decided to go armor since armor unit. And so I went back to Fort Knox, Kentucky for my advanced training and figured, yep, I'm going to be an artillery guy. Promoted to captain and took orders to go to Germany, where I thought I was going to go straight to a field artillery battalion.
Is this all still in that first 4 years?
Yeah, like right at the end of that first 4 years. So I got promoted to captain. In that time, we'd had twins, a boy and a girl, Samantha and Jackson, right at the end of that 4 years. So I had 3 children now. My wife's a school teacher. She decided she was going to take some time off while the twins were first few years of their life. We went to Fort Knox. I got orders to Germany. Like, this is great. We went over to Germany. I got diverted to like the headquarters in Germany. So I didn't go right to like doing what captains do. I was stuck on this, like the U.S. Army staff. Great, because we were in Heidelberg, Germany, which is an amazing place. It's now shut down, but it was an awesome place in Germany to be. We were loving it. And
at this point, you've committed to another 4 years or another 6?
Well, because I went to Germany, it was going to be another 3. Because you go through school, you like double as an out. Like if you go to school for a year, you owe the Army 2 years. So I owed 2 years for that. But since I went overseas, I owed additional year. So they had me for 3 years in Germany because they didn't want to spend that money to family move all your stuff. And then you decide to get out and they got to move it back. So I knew I had a 3-year commitment, and I was like, I'll figure it out then. This is all going pretty well. We'll see where it takes us.
I want to do a unique pivot or an awkward pivot if you don't mind.
No.
Because it's on the forefront of my mind. You've maintained a marriage through a 30-year career.
Yep.
One of the things for both of our sides of the house, first responder veterans, is divorce and not making it happen. Any advice that you have for somebody to make it work?
And I don't know, like, I don't know if there's like people have asked us that. They've asked, we've had kids are pretty successful. So like, give us some parenting advice. I don't know. We were very fortunate, I think, because both my wife and I came from very similar upbringings. She had a very stable, her parents, married forever. Her mom passed away years back, but no divorce there. My parents, same way, very strong family unit. We had very similar experiences growing up in terms of how we treated the holidays and all the like. She had 2 sisters, so she family of 3. I'm from family of 4. So there was a lot of similarities there, and we both came together with this idea, even though she didn't went through her first marriage and it didn't work out. Let's make this work. Like, if you do this, this is for life. This is that's how it's supposed to work. So we went into it that way, I think, which is good. I
wonder
it's crazy because it's like when people are like, oh, 3 weeks, how would you know? Like there was a sense for me and her that we were like totally in love, right? So that has not diminished. So that worked out. We're best friends, similar, interests. We love to do things together. We stay very active. We treated our kid. We both had the same kind of goal setting and mentality for our children. So we were never really at odds over much. I mean, probably the biggest stress in our life is we weren't the best with money. So we always overspent and did things we shouldn't have done with credit, and we, try to impress upon our kids, now that we're at a better spot in life, like don't do what we did, because it was always a bit nerve wracking. But the key was we never blamed each other, right? We took equal, blame and like, okay, we put ourselves in these situations. So the stress is shared. We got to come up with a plan to work our way back out of this, debt or whatever it was. So I think that was probably the best. Maybe if out of all that, trying to find the nuggets, it's like if you go into it knowing that there's no blame to be shared, no judgment. Like either the blame is shared, not like put on one or the other,
right? And
like stay away from judgment. You know what I mean? Like because we're both going through stuff. I
wonder what the psychology. I wonder what the psychology in the sense of how much it benefited both of you to have both your mom and dad in long-term marriages. I mean, obviously,
I think it had to have
been
helped.
Studies done.
Yeah, I think it had to. I mean, obviously, people have successful marriages and they come from families that had divorce. I don't know. I think a lot of it is that shared mentality that we've had, that we were teammates kind of like through the whole thing. That like didn't matter who was making more money or anything. Like we've always had a shared bank account. We always had friends who were like, who's paying the night that we're married?
Right.
Like, what do you mean who's paying? Well, she has her bank account, I have mine. I'm like, how does that work? So we went into it start that this is a shared experience and we're going to have to like lean on one another. I mean, my success throughout my entire career is 100% attributed to like my wife's support, her saying, go for it, whatever it was. So, I mean, to the point where like when we're in Germany, like where we were at, like perfect, like coming back around. Had a friend who was a 10th Special Forces Group guy, captain, was going to be a major. He actually wanted to go to the headquarters to be like in this planning position and be in Germany. He was like my best friend that I sat across from. Senior captain, he's about to be a major. And at that point, I was starting to question whether did I really want to be a field artillery battery commander, continued, doing the stuff. And he was like, it was, again, I've had fortunate, like weird timing to your ROTC thing, all the stuff that the special forces community was like desperately low on captains. Like this, they weren't filling their recruitment requirements. And that's important because normally if you didn't already like try out, go to assessment selection before you went to your advanced course, which was, you had to go to a maneuver advanced course. So that was part of it. So it was good that I already went. You weren't on the table. They weren't going to recruit you. Well, my year group was still open because they were still trying to fill their requirement. And he's like, hey man, don't get out of the Army. He goes, you'd be a great special forces officer. You should be a Green Beret. It's like, I don't know. How am I going to get out of Germany? I got the commitment. Like I got to get to school. It's going to throw everything off timing wise. He goes, I bet you like, a couple of captains, we can figure this out. Now I take that home to my wife because she knew I was thinking about like maybe like the Army's not for me at this point. And I do my 3 years, we get out of this thing and, young me, she's like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll teach and coach. You teach. She's like, we can't have two teachers. we barely can afford to live right now. Right. She's like, you got to figure something else out. Well, so I think she was like, the stability of the Army is like good for us. So again, great. She's probably my best mentor. So I bring that home and she's like, well, okay, what do you think? She goes, I had a Special Forces Sergeant Major when I was at Claremont that I told her about. That was like one of my best mentors. She's like, well, you always kind of talked about this. She goes, why haven't you done it yet? I go, well, because you, the kids, like those guys are the first to go anywhere. When there's not a war, they're always doing training all over the world. Like I'll be gone a lot if that's what we decide to do. And she's like, look, I think you should stay in. And if you do stay in, I would actually think best for all of us that you're like with the best people and you're doing the thing you want to do. So if you want to do this, I am 100%. I got your back. Support you, help you, whatever you need. So I was like, all right, I'm in. So that started the process of me like reaching out to the recruiter and this whole thing. And then it then became this whole other story of like me having to convince some people that I could actually get out of Germany if I got selected. Because I made it through most of the paperwork recruiting process. But when I got to the branch manager's desk, Lieutenant Colonel, he denied it and sent it back and said, we can't get Sullivan out of Germany because he owes, 3 years over there. They moved him and his family. Can't just move him back after like a year and a half if he makes it through selection. So I thought I had hit a hard no, and it was tough. I was like, man, I thought I was going to happen. Again, two captains who think they can solve the world's problems get together. This is when email's just getting going for the United States Army. He's like, I know that guy. I worked for him at 10th Special Forces Group. He was one of the commanders there. He's reasonable. Let's craft like the perfect email that you're going to get out of the Army unless you get your chance to go Special Forces, which is basically what we type up. We thought it was great. I sent it off. Now, long story short, it worked, but like 2 weeks later, I get an email back from that same lieutenant colonel, and it starts out with like, Captain Sullivan, who the F do you think you are that you're going to threaten the United States Army that you're going to get out? Like, you're so special that we want you to stick around if you don't get to go to selection and assessment and become a Green Beret if you make it. Like, you must think pretty highly of yourself. So
Good on you.
That's the start, right? The next paragraph is, I've shared this email with the Field Artillery Branch commander, like a guy, manager. And this is where like we started doing like high fives. And he said, if you don't make it through selection, he's going to make sure you're kicked out of the Army. And we're like, wait a second. Did I just read that right? That means I'm going to selection, and then you get to the next paragraph down. He goes, you'll go to the next selection class. It's in June of like, you got 6 months to get ready. This is what you get one shot at each of these things, selection and the qualification course. If you fail, we're not recycling you. You're going back to field artillery, and they have already like, again, the threat marked your file for like termination kind of situation. So I hope, best of luck. The guy was named Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Cleveland. He ended up being a 3-star general later on. But, we crossed paths a couple times, but yeah. So that was my path to leave the field artillery. Took me to the Special Forces community.
Now, when you leave Germany to go to start selection, does your family have to stay in Germany?
They stay in Germany. Selection's only like a month long. It's like 21 days. So I trained up. I had him, who's like, hey, man, this is the kind of events you're going to go through. He was pretty good about like, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen because you're not supposed to. You could kind of talk to people and get a sense of like, what were the big events? What are the things you got to get? It's a lot of rucks, 60-pound rucksacks, long range movements through the woods, doing land navigation. There's a thing called Team Week where you got to do these problem sets, carry a lot of heavy stuff, and they just try to break you and test you, psychological tests, all the things. That's all at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Actually, a small place called Camp McCall that's out in the woods in central North Carolina. And yeah, I got ready in Germany 6 months, but then I actually flew. The guy I worked for really wanted like me to be successful. I worked for the G3, and this full-bird colonel, he's like, we want to make sure that like if this is what you want to do, he was all on board. So he let me leave like a week prior so I could get acclimated to the weather a little bit in June in North Carolina, because not the same as Heidelberg, Germany. So I actually went and stayed with my sister-in-law, who was living near Raleigh, for a week, and continued to run and ruck and do that in the heat and the humidity. Signed up, did my selection, made it through.
Anything give you any significant problems?
So I ended up at one point, a lot of blisters, a lot of aches and pains through the things. I mean, it's you're carrying weight, you're doing these long movements, obstacle course, all this stuff. No injuries, but I did end up, not sure how it happened, but I got cellulitis in one of my in my ankle and it was coming up my leg. While we were out doing these long range land navigation course. And I finally went to the medics and I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's like causing my joint, it's a little bit of pain and the like. And, they're like, hey man, here's some antibiotics. We're going to check you back in 3 days. And if this isn't clearing up, you're done. We're pulling you from the course. So I was a little nervous, but luckily, they gave me some Cipro and I took it 3 days later. It was clearing up. And they're like, okay, you're good. So lost a lot of weight. My wife said she didn't recognize me when I probably lost 15 to 20 pounds out there. So she's like, what did they do to you when I got back? But, yeah, I made it back. And then I actually had another 6 months in Germany before I came back to Fort Bragg to start the year-long qualification course.
Where does 9/11 fall into all this?
So for me, I went to selection in 99. Went to the qualification course in 2000.
There's a moment in life when you realize it was never about you. Grind, spelled GRND, is different. There's no I in it on purpose, because the mindset was never about ego. It's about the mission. Started by a former Army Ranger, it's not about where you are. It's about how you show up. Different lives, different pressures, but the same mindset. Grind isn't clothing you wear just to look good. It's a reminder of why you keep going when it gets tough, and you keep putting in the work when no one's watching. For the early mornings, the late nights, the reps that no one sees. This isn't just fashion, it's fuel. Because real work isn't loud, real effort doesn't need applause, and real purpose doesn't quit. Head on over to thegrndcollective.com and use the promo code TRANSITION15 for 15% off your order.
You made it through the qualification course, and then they send you out to survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, SEER school. Did SEER school, and for us, the last 6 months of your training was your language school. So I was going to go to 3rd Special Forces Group. It's at Fort Bragg. Their area of the world is Africa. So you were either given Arabic or French, because they either spoke English as a second language, French, or Arabic, where if you were trained in armies in Africa on the continent, one of those countries. So I got French. All our buddies, we were all picking up our books for language school on 9/11 that morning, and air items, because we're airborne qualified and you had to continue to do your jumps while you were in airborne school. So we were picking up the stuff you need to do your, continue to do your training, this pieces of equipment. It was, we're all I was listening to talk radio. I remember it in my Jeep waiting to pick up our air items. We'd already picked up our books. In the reports of Cessnas are hitting buildings in New York City. It's crazy that this plane flew into one of the Twin Towers. Then all of a sudden the guy's like, wait, one of the other towers got hit, and we're all talking to each other. Are you listening to the radio right now? So we got our stuff. We went down to, there was a furniture store in Fort Bragg at that time on post. We knew there was TVs. We went to go let's go find a TV and see what's going on. And immediately we're like, this is not good. They hit the Pentagon, okay? And of course we, as these brand new special forces captains figured, we know exactly what's going on. These are terrorists, insurgents, this is our world. This is perfect. They're not even going to send us to language school. They're just going to send us straight to our units so we all can go, fight this war that's going to happen. That didn't happen. We just, next day it was impossible to get on post. I parked 5 miles. Well, it wasn't that far. Probably 4 miles off post at a grocery store because everything was backed up. Fort Bragg was an open post. There was no gates. There was no fences. They tried to shut everything down because they didn't know what was coming, right?
Right.
So I was like, I got to get to language school. I can't be late to class. So I parked, put all of my stuff in my rucksack, ran to school. It was me and 2 other guys had got before everybody else kind of showed up after lunch, because that's how long it took to drive on to post that day. So it was a nightmare for about a week, and then they figured it out. The military figured it out. And, did my 6 months of language school, ended up going right to 3rd group right there on Fort Bragg, and it was 3 weeks later I was in Afghanistan for my first trip. We were tasked with standing up the Afghan National Army. 1st Battalion, 3rd Group. That was my first trip in 2002.
Were you given the opportunity to pick what group you wanted to go to?
So similar to like before, like when you're in the Q course as an officer, you get to do a wish list. At that point, there used to be 2 groups at Fort Bragg, 7th and 3rd, and 7th's now down in Florida. They moved them, but my wife was like, knowing what the life, I was going to be traveling and being away from a lot. Her family was up in Virginia. Her parents and her sisters were close by, originally from West Virginia. And she's like, can you pick something that's on Fort Bragg? So gone, at least I can go visit my parents and be closer to like family and stuff. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Everybody wanted to go to 7th Group at that time. This is pre 9/11. 7th Group was still fighting the Narcotics War from like, 80,
South America.
Yeah, South America, late 80s, early 90s. The 7th Group guys were like the tip of the spear for that, working with Colombians and everybody else, Central and South America to like go after all these drug targets. Everybody wanted to go to 7th Group. Then it was 10th Group because it was Europe. So they have 1 battalion that's forward in Germany. The other 2 are in Fort Carson, Colorado. So like 2 gorgeous places. 10th Group was always like up there in the top 3. 1st Group's at Fort Lewis, and then they have a battalion in Okinawa. So similar, kind of like really cool environment. You're doing Southeast Asia, living either in 2 pretty cool spots in the world, like, Pacific Northwest or Japan. Then it was 5th Group and 3rd Group. 5th Group was at Fort Campbell and had the Middle East. And this, again, pre 9/11, everyone's like, do I really want to go to the Middle East? And then 3rd Group is at Fort Bragg. So you're right there at the flagpole, right where the schoolhouse is at. It's the African continent. And everyone's like, why would I want to go train, on the African continent? What's that all about? That sounds miserable. So I knew if I put 3rd Group first, we were guaranteed to stay at Fort Bragg. So that's exactly what I did. I was like, I'm putting 3rd Group. I put 3rd Group, got it, my number 1 choice, and it worked out.
They looked at the list.
Yeah.
Who the hell's asking for 3rd Group?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, this guy just wants to stay at Bragg. But oddly enough, you would fast forward to about 5-6 years later after the 9/11, 3rd Group's aligned to Afghanistan solely. Like we pulled almost everything out of because we were just rotating battalions back to back to back into Afghanistan. Everyone wanted to go to the war. So 3rd Group became one of the top groups to get to because you knew you were going to get to Afghanistan. Because 3rd and 7th were doing Afghanistan. 5th had Iraq, and then they were starting to rotate in 1st and 10th to help them out in Iraq. So if you wanted to go to Afghanistan, like everyone was putting down 3rd Group. So it was kind of funny how it kind of flipped over time, but because of what was going on in the world.
The time from selection to the Q course, any issues at Q course? That cellulitis come back, anything like that?
No, the only thing I had at the Q course, so the first phase of the Q course is essentially like Ranger school. You don't have to be a Ranger qualified soldier or officer to be a Special Forces guy. I never went to Ranger school. So sometimes I get made fun of for that because I don't have that little tab. Sometimes I make fun of people that I just went straight to college and skipped high school. But so they train you in small unit infantry tactics out at Camp McCall. You're out there for a couple months away from your family, just living out there and doing that stuff. And while I was out there, I didn't get cellulitis, but I always put my right knee down when you take a halt, a security halt. And with weight on your back and everything else, I ended up developing some pretty serious like water on my knee. So I had to get that drained a couple times, but that was probably the worst of it while I was continuing to jump, doing all the things we did. So made it straight through.
Jumping out of planes give you any apprehensions?
No, not really. I never did Halo. So I was just a static line guy, but yeah, I ended up in the trees once because the guy misspotted the thing and put us all out. Like all of us were in the trees one time. But other than that, no injuries from jumping. didn't do as much jumping as probably the normal person because I had 6 rotations to Afghanistan, and every time you got put on orders, we stopped jumping so we didn't have injuries. Put you on a rule that you would then get your jumps in when you got back from Afghanistan, so you do a whole bunch in like one short period of time instead of like every quarter kind of situation. But I mean, I never got scared, nervous. Like I didn't trusted my equipment, you know, whether that was you had to, because if you don't, then you'd probably get terrified about what's going to happen next. And then like the dirty secret about being a special forces guy when it comes to doing airborne operations, like you're jumping out of small aircraft or out of a helicopter. You know, you're not sitting on a tarmac for hours with like hundreds of extra dudes, like in the 82nd, jumping out, mass tack, you know, running into each other, bouncing off each other. It's like 12 guys at a time max going out of a bird, maybe 6 if it's a helicopter. So, you know, you would drive out to the drop zone, put your stuff on, you know, go up in the helicopter, scoot out, turn it in, shake your chute, and you were done for the day. Yeah, so it was like total like a Hollywood situation. So it's a pretty good, if you're going to be in an airborne unit, I highly recommend Special Forces. Yeah.
No marketing plug at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. That
first deployment was how long?
It was supposed to be 6 months. We ended up staying for about 8.5. It was in Kabul. We literally were like cleaning out the old Kabul Military Training Center, and we were taking people straight off the street that wanted to join the newly formed Afghan National Army. The officer corps actually were folks that had been basically kicked out of the army when the Taliban took over and just kind of went back into, you know, society. As soon as like we came and liberated Afghanistan, these guys found their uniforms and started showing back up and saying, I want to be an officer in the new army. So my team, we had different teams doing different things. I ended up with the 3rd Battalion of the Afghan National Army. Called them Banas, and then they turned them into Kandaks. It's words, Pashtun and Dari words for the same thing. But so we had the 3rd Battalion. Oddly enough, the French were there as well. The French Special Operations, that was their contribution. They were going to help us. They took the even battalions. We took the odd battalions, the Americans. And I was told by my battalion commander, hey, your battalion is going to leave Kabul. They're not going to do security around Kabul. They're actually going to go out and start fighting with Americans. You guys got a fighting force. So we ended up taking about 750 recruits in, and over about 8 weeks of training, we ended up about 350 left. It was an infantry battalion, and those guys started getting after it. We handed off the mission to actually a National Guard Special Forces unit in to relieve us after that rotation, and then 6 months later I was right back for my 2nd rotation, but that time I was out at a fire base in eastern Afghanistan.
6 total deployments.
Yep.
And this is definitely going to sound rhetorical and stupid, but does it get harder and harder to want to deploy with each subsequent one?
I think majority of us like kept wanting to go back, right? I mean, we were in it. We were definitely committed to what we were doing. So no, I actually enjoyed, that's the right word, but no, I was motivated to go back and do the work, right? I mean, that's why you were doing it. And we were seeing progress each time we went, you know, so, you know, we thought we were doing great stuff. And for me, my first 3 were pretty close back-to-back kind of things. I was a team leader right out, you know, the first 2 trips, training the Afghan National Army. 2nd trip, I'm out at a fire base in eastern Afghanistan doing patrols and trying to find bad guys. My 3rd trip, I'm back as a staff officer, and we're in southern Afghanistan in Kandahar, and I was working out of the 12 hours on, listening to radios and making sure guys had what they needed when things started. Air support or medevac helicopters or reinforcements. So I was the guy running the operations center, captain. From there, so that was like my first 3 trips. I was on schedule to come back. They were gonna take me out of the operations cell and the staff and make me the headquarters company commander. And we were going to come right back again for a fourth trip. Both me and my wife were a little bit burnt out at that point, and because it was like 6 months on, 6 months off, a couple of years of the war. And that was the second time I was like, I think maybe this is, I was deployed at that time, that third trip, talking to my wife. Yeah, she goes, this is tough with the kids, all 3 kids.
That's more kind of my mentality of asking the question, because I can understand, and I think that that's one of the things that we get wrapped up in. We love what we're doing in these careers, but the further you're into a family and your kids are getting older, and like your wife is experiencing, hey, this is fun for, but it's not getting fun anymore. That's where I was kind of going with it.
Yeah,
and then you feel that pressure for every subsequent deployment.
Oh, definitely. So a yes to that. My wife, when we were in Germany, when we got back from Germany, the twins were 4, and she decided they were getting into preschool. She went back to teaching. She's a math teacher. She taught middle school and high school. So she went back to teaching. So she was teaching, full time. Got my son's in middle school at that time. Oldest son, twins are starting preschool, and I'm going back and forth to Afghanistan. And when we're home, there's a whole bunch of training going on too. So it wasn't like I was home, right? Because there's still work. It's not like you got 6 months off before you go
you're
back.
Basically doing laundry and spinning back up. So
I think at that point she was a little bit more, I guess, supportive or open to the idea that maybe, this has been a good run. Like, you figure something else out. Again, I'm like, maybe I teach. And she's like, no, that's not what you're going to do. So I started thinking about it. I was talking to the battalion commander I worked for, incredible guy, became kind of like more of a longer term mentor. He's like, well, yeah, he goes, I understand what you're going through. He goes, but you're the guy, like you're one of those guys I see, having my job someday. You should be the HHC commander. Good. It's going to be good for you for your career, but I get it with so he's like, reach out to Branch and let him know what you're thinking. I guess start the process, figure out what you got to do to get out of the Army kind of situation. So I did. I sent an email off to my branch manager, told him hey, this is what I'm thinking. What does that look like? What's the timeline? We get back from this trip at this time. How much longer? They need to know because they would need to pick somebody else for this other job. All these things. And
are you in the 10, 11 year, 12 year mark about this time?
No, at that point I was probably, 9.
Okay. So you kind of,
I was
you're
just
almost at that tipping point.
I was right at the point where I had passed over for below the zone promotion to major. I was always kind of getting promoted ahead of my peers, but my peers weren't my same because I started late, right? So I was still in the year group 94. So I knew I was probably going to make major. And that was kind of the thing. You're kind of committing once you get to 8, 9, and this is my generation. We didn't have the same retirement option of paying in. Have something if you don't go to 20, you weren't getting anything, right? So there's that to consider too as you get closer to do I keep doing this if I don't know I'm going to make it all the way?
Within the dynamics of the machine that is Special Forces within the Army, you went to 3rd group originally. As you start and continue promoting up, is there a point where you're almost pulled out of A group and put more into headquarters? Or do you always stay with the group you're in?
Typically, guys stay in the same group through lieutenant colonel and even maybe as the full bird that gets to be the group commander. Because you're working in an area of the world, you have all that expertise and experience. It's good to keep it, if you, at that point we weren't using our language, but now they're back to using their languages and stuff like that. You need that guy that's still speaking French or Spanish or Chinese, whatever it is, Arabic. Anyways, talked to him about it. He encouraged the guy, oddly enough, I didn't hear anything back. Sent another email. I was like, hey man, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of the Army. And I get this, hey, can you call me, U.S. time tomorrow. I'm in Afghanistan. Let's talk about this. So I call the guy the next day, and he's like, hey, I've been meaning to reach out to you. I don't think you should get out because I got to fill these jobs with junior majors, and you're probably going to get promoted. And they said, even if you're still a captain, I can send you at Special Operations Command Central, which is in Tampa, Florida. So you can go down to Florida, or you can go to Hawaii to Special Operations Command Pacific and go work as a staff officer there. They both need guys, and I got to fill these billets. He goes, so don't get out. Call your wife and ask her if she wants to go to Florida or Hawaii. Typical, like, Army, like.
Why does it sound like a setup?
Right? Yeah. And I immediately that
don't
day.
Call my wife.
Well, no, I did. I had lunch with my battalion commander. I was like, hey, did you call branch? Like, it's really odd. I'm having these conversations. They don't return my calls. And all of a sudden, these 2 jobs, like, no, stay in. There's no repercussion. You can go to Hawaii or Florida and get a time to take a knee and take care of your family and all these things. Stay in the Army. It looks like you could have a great career ahead of you there, Sullivan. I don't know what you're talking about. I know he called. So then I called my wife, and she's like, well, I don't know. What do you think? I was like, well, they both sound great. Here's the problem. If I go to Florida, I'm probably going to deploy because there's 2 wars going on at this point. They're in charge of both, and they're pulling guys out of that headquarters to go augment guys forward, headquarters forward. I go, so I don't think I'll be in Tampa. I go, so unless you want to stay in the States to stay closer to your family, I think we roll the dice, go to Hawaii. At that point, there was Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines, where they were sending forces and folks to just train the Filipinos who were fighting terrorists in southern Philippines. I was like, I could end up going there, but they're not really pulling guys out of the headquarters. They're taking first group guys. But let's go to Hawaii. That sounds great. We'll stay in the Army. I don't have to worry about you being a teacher, right? So
win-win.
Yeah. So that's what we did. I left that. We pretty much just left in June. I left Afghanistan a couple weeks prior to the unit getting home. I had to get immediately packed, and we went to Hawaii. So that kind of reset everything for us, like as a family and everything else, because got to Hawaii. It was supposed to be 2 years there. My oldest son, was starting his freshman and sophomore year of high school. So we were like, well, he has to go to 2 high schools. At least that works out. Kids were just, getting into first grade at that point. So the twins, it was a great time. My wife didn't enjoy teaching in the school district there. It was tough. Like, the schools in Hawaii aren't the greatest public schools in America. So she would say, like, she didn't want to go back to Hawaii just if she thought she had to teach there.
How was your son's experience with starting high school in Hawaii?
He had a good time. He loved it. He loves Hawaii. He still talks about, like, his friends there and the experience he had there. We lived in a pretty good part of the island of Oahu. We kind of, like, paid more for our housing so he could go to the best public high school. Yeah, he had a great experience. And the twins were there for first and second grade. They even remember it. They talk about, going on hikes and going to the beach. My son's actually stationed there now. Both of the twins are now in the Army. I haven't mentioned that, but he's stationed there now in the 25th Infantry Division. So he loves Hawaii. He's happy to be back. But we had a great time. There was a point where I thought, when I was told I was going to go to the Philippines to go do some staff work for 6 months. But this was a year after we had been there. It wasn't necessarily a combat environment, so my wife wasn't as nervous about it. But things changed just like a couple days before I was supposed to fly, and they're like, no, you're staying here. You're more important here than going down there. So that worked out. So we did 2 years in Hawaii. It was an absolute blast. From there, I went to Monterey to the Naval Postgraduate School, because as a major in the Army, you go do some additional schooling and training. So I got to go to graduate school. Special Operations Command has a degree that they promote there. So did that for 18 months. So we had been away from everything for almost 4 years.
So is that does going to school actually become your duty assignment?
It does. Yeah, in the Army. So, and the Army's unique where they have like additional officers.
Because Monterey is horrible also.
Oh, yeah. So we went from, like, we've had some gyms. We went from Fort Lewis, to Germany after, Fort Knox is, went to Germany. Then Fort Bragg, we loved Fort Bragg, but then we were in Hawaii for 2 years. My wife and kids stayed for the full 2 years because my son went his last 2 years of high school was in California up there in Monterey. He had we actually sent him to a boys Catholic school in Salinas because they had a good football team. He's a football player, and my wife taught out in Salinas at public schools. But they stayed the full 2 years so he could get it through graduation. I actually had a 3-month course at the end of my 18 months of graduate school, Belvoir, so it worked out. As soon as he graduated, I went back, got the family, and we went right back to the 3rd group. I got picked to be a commander, same battalion I was in as a captain.
So was it a combination of just the natural progression of your career, or could you have stayed in Hawaii if you wanted to?
No, yeah, I had to leave Hawaii. The progression of my career as a major is that you go back to a special forces unit to be a company commander. So majors in SF are company commanders, and then the team leaders are captains. So I wanted to continue on. My goal was to be a battalion commander and, continue on up and maybe be a general someday. So that meant going back to Fort Bragg, to 3rd group, and getting back into that path. Now, I was looking at 1st group because I was exposed to them when I was out in the Pacific because they worked that area. One of the guys I worked with, Lieutenant Colonel, was going to be a battalion commander. He's like, hey, if 3rd group doesn't take you back, I can get you into 1st group. It's going to be a harder path because you're not a known entity and working against the guys that have been there a while. So there was a point in time where I thought maybe I'm going to end up at Fort Lewis or Okinawa back in a different group. Worked out that the guy that I'd worked with, he was not my company commander, had taken 1st Battalion, and he called me up and he's like, hey, I'm pulling you back. My company commanders.
Now, at this point, have you completely switched to looking at a 30-year career, or are you thinking 20 and then reevaluate?
I was thinking 20. Like, my goal then was, okay, now that I'm committing to be a major company commander, I knew for SF guys, you do company command, and then the goal is to stay in group for like 3 years. So your 2nd year, it's a year in company command, a year as a staff officer at the battalion levels, either as the executive officer or the operations officer. And then you hope to move up to group to be either the executive officer up there or the operations officer. Again, weird path for me. Did my company command. That was my 4th rotation to Afghanistan. I move up. We're a year back. Go back again. Executive officer. I'm trying to compete for group. I get a new battalion commander, and he's like, I don't want you to leave. We're going back to Afghanistan. Talk to the group commander. You're switching to be the operations officer after you do this year as the executive. So I stayed in the same battalion for 3 years as a major, which is kind of not great for me. And so I went back for my 5th rotation as the operations officer, right back in that same place in Kandahar when I was there as a captain. Now I'm the guy that was in charge of everything. Again, because I was so senior, I actually got promoted to lieutenant colonel while I was in that job, which was odd. Battalion commander who was a lieutenant colonel and an operations officer who was a lieutenant colonel. It worked out more for him because he would send me to all the meetings with like the
you take care of this
conventional guys with 10th Mountain Division and stuff. And they're like, "Do you guys are you a deputy commander?" I was like, "No, I'm the operations officer." "Why are you a lieutenant colonel?" "Where's the guy's name's Chris Riga. Where's Riga at?" I'm like, "Well, he's out with the Afghans fighting the war." Did that. Was my 5th rotation, and those went well. Stressful. That was a longer one as well. That we got extended like 10 months. That one was pretty taxing on us, like family wise. And got home, switched to the headquarters, Special Operations headquarters at the Special Forces headquarters at Bragg, working for a 2-star general. I was in the ops department. Did that for a year. He made me his executive officer, which you're kind of like his, basically,
His
military.
attaché.
Well, you had the captain that when it took him everywhere, I was the guy that planned his day, right? So I managed his calendar and everything that he was doing. He ended up leaving there to go to the schoolhouse. Took me with him over there, and while I was at the schoolhouse is when I got picked up for battalion command, 3rd group. So I ended up finishing out my time with him, going right back to 3rd group, took over the battalion, and then we went for my last and final trip to Afghanistan. I went as battalion commander. And by that time, it was towards the end of Operation Enduring Freedom. It was the last 3 months. It was odd time because, like, within a year and a half, we had gone from 6 SF battalions working all over the country to 1 that I was in charge of. The 06 headquarters had been dissolved. And then I was working directly for the 2-star soft general country doing basically the same stuff we were doing with a lot less stuff. This was like 2014, 15. So the last 3 months of Operation Enduring Freedom, first 3 months of Resolute Support Mission. And the good thing for me was the guy I was working for, the 2-star, was that same guy I was the executive officer for. So I knew exactly how he operated, what we needed. So not having that 06 between us, it kind of worked out. But that was my last and final trip to Afghanistan. Finished that out. We were transitioning 3rd group back to doing work on the African continent. My 2nd year, I was the first battalion in almost 10 years to have teams going back to different places across the continent. So we got that going again. I got picked to be a colonel and go to the Army War College. So oddly enough, my last 2 months in command, I was 6. I was a full bird colonel, which is not normal. And went off to the War College for a year. I got a year-long command as an 06 in Lebanon. Special Operations Forces in Lebanon for a year. Worked out of the embassy. Probably the coolest mission I ever had. Armed forces who are just awesome folks. At that point, ISIS out of their country is what we were helping them with. Cool.
When you're deployed at that, I'll call it the mid-senior leadership position, like your 5th rotation to Afghanistan.
Yep.
What's it like for you day to day in the sense that, and forgive me if this is just a completely oddball question, if you're just like, shit, that group's going out on a deployment today, I just want to get out of I want to get out of the box for a few hours, I'm just going to tag along, or is that even optional?
Well, it wasn't optional for me as the operations officer. Like that was people always think, oh, when you're out, when I was a major company commander, I probably saw the most like combat stuff. Best rotation ever. Going out every other day. The teams were going out. We were running our little operations center. I was in the Helmand province. We were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It was amazing. Like, best war stories. I would do that all day long. I'd look forward to going back to do that all day long. Sitting in the operations center for like anywhere from something like 16 to 20 hour days.
I was going to say
for like 10 months straight. Like sleep was destroyed. Living on like Rippets, which is like, energy drinks and adrenaline. Because I had to be up and awake anytime anybody was getting shot at. I had to be in the operations center. My sergeant major had to be there with me. I was the only other person authorized to like do kinetic strikes or do things in support of them or launch like reserve forces. Besides the battalion commander, the battalion commander I worked for was usually out there with the guys. He was like, I'm going to be out doing stuff. I'm not back here because I'm in charge and that's what I get to do. Right. So yeah, that was my most rotation, like most stressful, having to listen to people on the radio. You're listening to what's going on. You're watching the Predator feed on the screens, everything from like everything going great to like guys getting ready to exfil and we had a Siege 47 one time, or no, they're coming in on infill CH-47, the guy misjudged. It was flat ground, puts it in a ditch, flips the thing over. We're watching that live on TV. Luckily, nobody got like seriously injured. But, you know, those kind of situations, you're just like, well, we're not going to bed for the next 3 days. Like literally. That was the one thing that probably saved me is I was like always a big runner. So if I had an opportunity where I knew we had some time and I knew something probably wasn't going on, I always had a cell phone with me. Or a radio, and I'm like, I'm going for a run around the airfield. Call or send. Like, here's my route. Send a car to come pick me up if something bad happens, but it doesn't seem like anyone's out right now. So I'm going for a long run. I'll be back. That was the only time it seemed like I ever left the compound, unless it was for a meeting over with like somebody else or something. Yeah.
At that level, from an operational standpoint, do you still have minimum qualifications that you have to hit? Shooting, all that type stuff? Are you pretty much out of the loop at that point as far as an operational level?
I mean, we
from
still
the
have
team perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we still have. I mean, you still have your annual requirements and everything. I mean, so and then any opportunity you have where it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the range, shoot and stuff just so you can do it. But the
you don't get to do per se like team movements or anything like that.
No, that also. I mean, really, that stops after your time as a company commander as a special forces Beret officer. You may get to do some stuff as a battalion commander and get out on the ground again, but more than likely, if you're on the ground, you shouldn't be shooting. You're back away from anything, maybe up
just
on a
get
hill.
out of the way of the people who actually
you're doing command and control stuff, right? So you're on the radios. You're just there because you need to be there because that's where they need you. But like that last rotation as a battalion commander, I was flying around, visiting, doing visits, meeting with our Afghan commanders, our soft commanders, the Europeans. So I was traveling quite a bit, country. But I don't even that rotation. I never went out as a battalion commander, like on the ground or in a firefight type of situation. I had 3 companies commanded by majors. They were spread across the country, limited assets. We had a couple times where we went to a location to set up a headquarters so we had better. I was at the point of like where I could make decisions right on the spot. That only happened a couple times, but for the most time I was right there in that operations center. Because again, at that point, not even my operations officer had the authority to like drop a bomb if it needed to be dropped. Unless if the guys are in a firefight, they can call in support.
Right.
But if you're doing something to support them kinetically that they can't see, it's on that battalion commander to like he owns that mission. So if something bad happens, you dropped it on the wrong target. Casualties, that's all on you. So similar type of rotation where I was up a lot, not a lot of sleep that last trip. My sergeant major and I would try to get out though, see the guys shoot, work out, do all the things. You know, keep our minds right. But yeah, you're not getting to do the stuff, the door kicking, get off helicopters. That's captains.
I used to be a cool guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Former action guy. Yeah.
You said your time in Lebanon, is that also considered a combat deployment or was that more of kind of like an admin deployment?
No, it was. It's considered, I think it still is, obviously, considered a combat zone in the Middle East. Although Lebanon's very unique in terms of how it's treated, the different rules, it is a unique environment. Like, if you know anything about the country, the way it's set up, how it was the civil war they had, relative peace, but they're still trying to figure out how to work together, all these different religions that divided up like all parts of government based on like something that happened in the 1950s. So, I worked with a very small group of people out of the embassy. And then I had special operations teams, MARSOC team. I had one. I don't know. I didn't ever have any SEALs when I was there, but I had an Air Force special operations team and then multiple Army special operations. And they were partnered with the Lebanese armed forces that were basically fighting terrorists in their country. So we were doing all their training, helping them integrate new equipment that the U.S. was like get to the Lebanese armed forces. It was a pretty dynamic time. Then 2017-18, they still had a pocket of ISIS that was in the northeast part of the country that they were trying to like push out and back into Syria. So we were helping them plan that and get prepared for that operation. There still is tension between, because they're at a constant state of war with their neighbors to the south.
Middle East. I don't know what you're talking about.
With Israel. So at that point, the Israelis kept threatening that they were going to drive north because of the issues with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has like its own like shadow, like military force that most of its at that point was in Syria helping the Assad regime while I was there. So they weren't necessarily, but they still have these pockets and missiles that they would fire in. Occasionally, Israelis would come in and either drop bombs on southern Lebanon, or they would fly over into Syria and drop bombs on the Lebanese Hezbollah folks that were there. Always fun. Two, F-35s from Israel, supersonic over Beirut, and then go into. So it was a dynamic time of all these different things happening. Had an incredible ambassador that I worked for. General Votel was the CENTCOM commander. I worked directly for him as his senior commander in the country. So it was a really cool in terms of problem solving, working with like highly motivated soldiers that were training a military that's highly motivated. I love the Lebanese people. The country's beautiful. It's like the center of like world's history. You got Roman ruins, the start of Christianity. There's all kinds of, there's all this, anything you can think of, the cedars of Lebanon that's in the Bible. Like it's just gorgeous country. You're on the Med in December. It's 80 degrees, you down there and it's on the beach. And then you could go up to a ski resort in the mountains in Lebanon same day if you wanted to, It's an incredible, the people there, I think they live their life kind of like, hey, this all could go away. So they're very sociable, a lot of partying going on in Lebanon. You had to keep the guys away from that stuff. But I absolutely enjoyed the entire year that I was there. It was pretty dynamic, part of like some very big strategic like decision making that's going on, but also like working down and in with like some incredible folks. So.
Did you know coming to the end of that deployment that the end of your career was near?
Yeah, at that point I knew, based on that command I got as a full bird colonel, that I was probably not competitive for general officer, because my peers were group commanders. They were commanding third group or one of the other groups. So I knew that, okay, I'm probably going to have a couple more jobs. If I want, I could stay till 30 doing like staff jobs and things like that. But at that point I thought, okay, I'm going to go home. I knew I was going back to Fort Bragg to be the operations officer for Special Forces Command. That'll be my last job. That's probably good. So it would have been probably 27 years at that point. 26. About that time frame, probably about 26. The general officer I'm working for there, commander of Special Forces Command, a guy named General Dietrich, was that same lieutenant colonel that was going to take me to first group when I was at SOCPAC, real small community. He's like, hey, I don't want you to, I know you're getting out. Like, I know you're going to retire. I want you to be the chief of staff my second year, because I'm going to retire out of this job, or at least he thought he was. They ended up. Stars. But he's like, so move upstairs to the chief of staff job. He goes, it looked great on a resume. I was like, whatever. I go, I'll do anything for you. I'll work for you. So I'll stay around for another year. And I figured, okay, that's my last year. The Army keeps getting you. While I was in that job, the Army, like the conventional Army, had created these things called Security Force Assistance Brigades, which looked a lot like Green Beret units, small teams. The idea was they would go out and train conventional units, because the special operators were training special operators. Augment, and this would be this great opportunity, because the way the Army was doing like any sort of advisory stuff in Afghanistan and Iraq for years, they were pulling officers and NCOs out of units, leaving those units kind of like hollow leadership, while these guys went and did these advisory missions that needed to happen in Iraq and Afghanistan. Build a separate unit that does that, create some more NCOs and officers so they don't come out of these other units. So,
do they become an element within special forces?
No, they weren't. They were conventional.
When you look forward to that first cup of coffee, as soon as that morning alarm goes off, then Blue Line Roasting is the choice for you. They're a Tennessee-based law enforcement-owned company. They're roasting small batches of premium coffee, fresh, within 48 hours of your ordering, and ship fast so it doesn't sit around getting stale. From Patriot, their light roast, to Failure Drill, their dark roast. They've got something that fits whatever you prefer. Whole bean or ground, it's your call. But Blue Line Roasting is more than just good coffee. A portion of every purchase goes to support law enforcement families who are dealing with line of duty injury or loss. So your morning routine becomes something bigger. Great coffee and real impact. Grab a single bag, try a sampler, or set up a subscription so you're never caught without it. Shipping is always free. And for the listeners of this podcast, use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your order. Head on over to bluelineroasting.com and make your morning count.
It's interesting if you look at like how this whole thing was built. At one point, they were going to have a green beret, brown beret, but it looked very similar. The 3-star head of U.S. Army Special Operations Command, 2-star that I was working for, the guy that worked was all Army Special Operations at Fort Bragg. He talked to the Army. He's like, hey, I think you should open up one of these brigades to a Green Beret because the experience they have, they'll help you get this thing right. So the first group of guys were all conventional guys for these 5 brigades they built. I get a call from that 3-star, and he's like, hey, I want you to stay around for 2 more years. We're going to make you a SFAB, Special Security Force Assistance Brigade, commander. This is going to make you competitive for general officer. I was like, I don't know if that's the case. He goes, no. Like, the Army's going to see it different because they love these guys. They're all getting promoted to general. Like, it's almost a done deal.
Trust me.
You just got to stay in. And I was like, well, at that point, I still wasn't exactly sure like what my plan was for transition. So I went home to my wife again, and I was like, hey, I can stay for another 2 years. I'll be in command. So it's going to be like, busy times. This is 2020 at this point. So it's like we're in COVID, coming out of COVID. Things aren't really going to pick up for at least probably a year until we get out of this thing. What do you think? I go, and they were going to keep me at Fort Bragg because there was one at 2nd Brigade was at Fort Bragg. I go, so we don't have to move. She goes, okay, if you want to do it, let's do it. So I said yes. They took me on. So I got a 2nd command as a 06, 2 years running 2nd SFAB. At that point, Afghanistan was shutting down. They were sending the SFABs to Afghanistan to help out in Afghanistan, but when that shut down, they immediately aligned them regionally, just like the Special Forces groups. And 2nd was aligned to Africa. So I leaned into it and used my experience to help figure out how we were going to get all these small teams deployed. At any given time, I had 20 teams ready to go do different training missions on the continent and different high water mark. We had 16 teams out at one time before I transit command. It was a great time. I was told that, yeah, you did great. This is it. You're the man.
Play that much.
Yeah. But I mean, I thought that, I bought into it for a little bit and it didn't happen. The first look, and they're like, no, the second look, you're going to get on your second look. Make it on my second look to GO. So I knew for sure at that point, all right, I got to figure out what I'm going to do now that I'm an adult. So at that point, I was coming up on 30 years. Get out. Army Special Operations Command is like, well, you owe us 1 more year. We need you to stay and go be the chief of staff at the schoolhouse for your last job. It'll be a great job for you to transition out of. I'm like, that's one of the hardest jobs on Bragg. Like that, it's nonstop. It's the schoolhouse. That's where I did my last job, was as the chief of staff at a special warfare center in school at Bragg, which is another 2-star headquarters that trains all the Green Berets, psychological operations, and civil affairs soldiers. That was my last gig.
Which in all that did you enjoy the most?
My whole career? I mean, I probably gravitate towards that time as a major when I was a company commander. I had some incredible teams working for me. I had a massive amount of autonomy as a SF major, part of Afghanistan that I was in. We had a few guys get shot and injured, but I didn't lose anybody in terms of that rotation. So, and there was a couple like really cool missions that we did. So that's probably what I, gravitate towards like that. That was like this time. But there's so many different, like I had time on my team. Like I could never like get that back. Every SF guy wants to go back to the team and be a captain again. So that was amazing. I mean, I enjoyed my time as a field artillery officer. When I was in Lebanon was incredible, joke. I was like, it's like Game of Thrones. Everybody had their own agenda. You never knew what was going to happen. But so I really didn't, I mean, there was a few staff jobs. I'd probably say I didn't want to do those ever again. But for the most part, like I enjoyed almost every year in the Army. There were some tough times. Those times, having to, family and everything else being away, but losses in Afghanistan, things like that. But the most part, I had an absolute blast.
So coming to the end, what was your plan? Did you have anything in place as far as being an adult and moving into the civilian world?
Yeah. So, I mean, there were multiple opportunities at that point. As a Special Forces colonel, I have a security clearance, so that, I mean, I could have gone straight into private sector in the defense industry and probably got a job right out the gate. I did not want to sell my peers who were staying in equipment, but that I definitely could have got a job, making a lot of money and doing that. I knew that's not what excite me on day to day. So I started to look at like, where could I go in terms of continuing to like provide a service, whether it's like mentorship or like consulting. I had a friend that I'd met when I was a lieutenant colonel. I was at the schoolhouse, and before I was a battalion commander, we did an exchange with the Cleveland Browns. They wanted to see how we trained and picked people to be Green Berets. They offered to let us go to summer camp and see how they trained, NFL football players. So, incredible experience. Became really good friends with this guy. And he and I started talking about, well, there could be an opportunity for me to start my own consulting, where I'd talk to professional athletes about like the similarities of special operations teams and like the high stakes, obviously different, but professional athletes, the idea of like what happens transition, what it means to be a team player, and compare my experiences. You could pay it all day long by different teams to either sit in the, clubhouse somewhere, talking to baseball players, and they'd probably have you on salary, or if you just wanted to do consulting. So I started to build that out and start to do some work on like putting that together. When this guy, Mike Irwin, who was an intelligence officer when I was a company commander, said, no, you're not going to do any of that. You're going to come work for me at Team Red, White, and Blue. You helped me start 13 years ago in 2010. You would be the right guy to be in a service organization that's helping out veterans, active duty, all the stuff that we do. This is the thing you need to do. Like, stop work on everything else. Let's do this instead.
What's
that kind of like just dropped? He actually started talking to me before I took second SFAB and thought I was getting out the first time. He started, hey, what are you doing? Are you going to get promoted? He wanted me to get promoted. He's always like, yeah, the Army would be better with you in it. But if you're not in it, let's start talking about this. So that was always kind of like this thing I thought about, but, wasn't sure. Convinced me, don't, all that other work. Like, this is what I think you should try at least first. Let's do this first.
What is the mission set of Team Red, White, and Blue?
Yeah, so Team Red, White, and Blue, RWB. So Mike started this when we left Afghanistan, that fourth trip for me. Mike left the battalion as the intelligence officer to go to the University of Michigan to get his graduate degree to go teach at West Point. West Pointer. And while he was there, this is 2009, going into 2010, height of two wars, and we're seeing friends, we're seeing people we know come back struggling with that transition from combat environment, whether they were wounded or not wounded, getting out of the service, and then now this came from this very extreme environment to like what I'm doing now. He talked to some folks at the VA up there in Michigan, and they basically said, hey man, it doesn't matter, like combat or not, you lead the service, like a few things happen to every single person. It doesn't matter if you're high functioning, you know what you're going to do next, or you're lost. Because they're like, you immediately lose your sense of community. You're in this extreme team environment, service unit, like beat into you at basic training to like, everything you did every single day with your unit. You had people on your left and right. That was your community. Your purposeful like relationships were those folks that you were in uniform with. That goes away because the majority of those folks stayed, you left, or if somebody left with you, they probably didn't go to the same place you were going to go post service, right? You went to different hometowns, or maybe you stayed. So sense of belonging and community becomes this huge gap. Second thing is your sense of purpose. You don't have that daily, like, this is what we're doing, here's your mission, this is what's going on. Whether you're being told that's what it is or you're bought into it, you had a sense of purpose each and every day. Again, unless you're one of those really highly motivated folks, most people are like, I just don't feel like I have that same sense of purpose, accountability that I had when I was in the service. Third thing is service members think they're choosing themselves. Like, I don't have to get up anymore at 6:30 and do that forced run, ruck march, PT. That was all miserable in the rain, cold. I'm going to just take a break. I'm going to take a knee. I've worked so hard. I deserve it. I don't need to do PT anymore. I'll jog every once in a while, but I'm going to maybe sit on the couch and they'll do something else. So they start to, they're not doing any physical activity that's keeping them ahead of like things in terms of their health and wellness. And then those three things immediately start to impact their mental health. They're isolated. They're not as healthy as they used to be, and they just don't. They're like, if you could solve for that, start that organization. So Mike, being a runner, really into fitness, came out of like this group, special operators that are like, the team is everything, that is your community. Like, how do I replicate that for veterans and those folks? This post-service basically leaned into the idea of, a running club. Maybe it's a fitness organization. We build out, this community that you can plug into that keeps you moving. The mission is like both yourself, but like, hey, like you're on a team. Again, you're going to help like Sully stay in shape by showing up for the 5K every Wednesday that we put on. So it's service oriented, right? It's not just, about you working out, but you're doing it for somebody else as well, because you're part of this group of people that are going to keep people moving together. So you got your sense of belongings kind of back. You're starting to build some meaningful relationships. You got that sense of purpose. It's tied to physical fitness and your health and wellness. Your mental health will go up, and the idea is that, that's what we're going to do, and this thing will take off. We'll figure it out, So Mike came up with the idea, started working with some folks, came up with a great logo and a red T-shirt, called me about 6 months into it and was like, hey, I started this nonprofit. I need you to start it at Fort Bragg. I'm going to send you a box of T-shirts, and we're going to figure this thing out. I'm like, well, what is it? And he goes, it's kind of like a running club. It's kind of like you can do CrossFit. You can do whatever you want. Like, just get people together. He goes, and I want it to be active duty, guard, reserve, family members. He goes, community members that no tie to the military, that just want to like do stuff to support the military. Of course, the nation was on fire for like supporting those that served around 2010. He goes, they can join for free. It's all for free. He goes, and the service members and the veterans get the free T-shirt. So just start handing those out. Just start getting people together to do stuff. And I was like, okay. He goes, it's going to work. I'm telling you. All right, Mike, I'm on board. He's like, you're a smart guy. And then he said, and he says he doesn't remember this, but I do. He said, hey, man, eventually you're getting out of the Army. You have to. Even if you make general officer or whatever, you're eventually going to have to retire and move on. You're going to want Team RWB to exist for you. Because if you start now, it's always there for you. That's why you need to get involved in it too. So I was like, all right, send me the T-shirts. I got it going at Fort Bragg. Things started to take off. When I became a battalion commander, I found somebody else to kind of like take over the chapter at Fort Bragg. But I stayed as a member. So when I went to the War College, I joined when I was at Carlisle. I was doing stuff online when I was in Lebanon because they started doing some online challenges and events. Stayed active while I was at 2nd SFAB. So it was always kind of a thing I was a part of, and that's when he had started it, kind of left. Mike's a very entrepreneurial spirit. He's got tons of things going on. He's got more hours in the day than anybody I know. He had come back as the executive director, but he was looking to like move back out, do something else. So that's when he started that seed when I got back from Lebanon. He stayed in the role. Kind of worked out that I got those 2 extra years time at schoolhouse. He's like, this is perfect timing. We're actually he goes, let's use the Career Skills Bridge program, which the Army has to like let you try something out while you're still in uniform to figure out, is that what I want to do when I get out? I had some folks who are like, hey, you're a colonel using this. I'm like, I'm the most indoctrinated guy here. Like if anybody needs to figure out what they're doing, it's me. So for 90 days, I think I've cut it back to 60 now, but I was an intern, while I was still on active duty, Team RWB. That seemed to work out. It gave me a chance to kind of see the organization and kind of see who I was. They hired me once I started terminal leave as the chief of staff. Mike stayed as the executive director. That gave us like a year for me to kind of further understand how this whole nonprofit world works. What would be my role, and like, do I still want to be the executive director? And it also gave the board an opportunity to interact directly with me. Mike was kind of talking to him like, I think this is the guy, because in about a year, I think so it was about after the first 8 months, they voted. They're like, yeah, take the bet on Sully to be the next executive director. And Mike, again, being very deliberate, military oriented, he's like, okay, we got to be smart about this though. Comfortable with you taking over this organization, down and in, and like supporters. So last year, basically they switched my title to incoming executive director. Mike was the outgoing executive director, and he worked kind of up with donors and sponsors and kind of the messaging. I continued to kind of take the reins to run the whole organization down and in. In October was our 15th year anniversary of the organization. That's when we did our transition of who was the executive director. Of course, since we're a, fitness group, it all started. Their first event was the Twin Cities Marathon in 2010. Mike's like, we're running the marathon together. We're carrying a flag, and I'll hand you the flag at the finish line. And that's the handoff of the executive director job. So ran the marathon. We finished. Director since October. Continuing with that mission, the mission is to enrich veterans' lives. We're saying we're forging America's leading health and wellness community. Really, it's that kind of holistic health and wellness. It's fitness, nutrition, sleep. We try to do all these things through both our digital programming, in-person chapters that we have all across the United States. About 150 chapters across the United States. We even have one in Hong Kong overseas. Really active online application, like driven digital community that keeps people, if you're not near a chapter, you can still be involved and do stuff. So it's kind of our thing. It seems like a simple solution. Get people together in person to do some physical activity, increase their physical and mental health. They're like, but it's an evergreen mission. It's always a challenge, but once you get people going, they really get bought in.
Do you find the different chapters kind of lean towards a different physical fitness activity?
Yeah. If you've been to one chapter, you've been to one chapter is kind of like what we talk about. Cause like it all kind of depends on like that core group. Like Fayetteville, when I started the Fayetteville chapter, I was a runner. I partnered with the Fayetteville Running Club, which was just starting up at the exact same time. I was like, hey, you're looking for the same members I'm looking for. Let's like bring our powers together to make one super group of like, so even to this day, the majority of what happens in Fayetteville, Fort Bragg is like running events. You go to Savannah, where I live now near Hilton Head, and that's the chapter closest is the Savannah chapter. They love to ruck. So like 3 days a week, you can go do a rucking event. You know, they're like, you can show up and run if you want to, but we ruck here. You know what I mean? So there's ones that are like CrossFit chapters. There's groups that are just like, we do stuff on wheels. We like to ride we're cyclists. Maybe some of us are triathletes, but this is this chapter. So there's a little bit of that flavor. We try to provide opportunities for like multiple events for people to find, you know, what they want to do. But yeah.
Going back to how you described the planning, the mission set and the motivation behind it, especially that loss of tribe and that loss of purpose. For you personally, did you struggle with any of that when you hung up the uniform last time? I know you already had this.
So I had this, pocket. Right? So that's where I got pretty lucky because I had it, right? So I knew I was going into this.
But there was still that point where you were no longer an Army officer.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes. We like to say like RWB is like military adjacent. So there's still the majority of the folks are veterans. We have some civilians in there. We got some family members that work that are. Our full-time staff is only 30 full-time staff members. We're fully remote. So when I was in Fort Bragg, there was a couple folks that were also there, so I get to see a couple people. But now that I moved away, most of the time I'm not seeing the folks that work for me unless it's on a Zoom call, right? You know, so that makes things a little bit difficult. I won't lie. There's been a couple of times people have accused me of like, hey, man, I'm not in the Army and you're not a colonel, you know? And I deliberately, because my first name's Mike and Mike Irwin was that I was like, okay, I'll go by Sully. Call that by my friends and stuff. And actually that kind of removes a little bit of this air of like, oh, he's a colonel. Just call me Sully. Go by my name. And that helped. But yeah, there definitely is a difference, right? In terms of your expectations. I mean, I actually started to realize the organization itself, like, hey guys, we're killing ourselves. We're setting suspenses, creating all this stress at this top level to get things done. Yeah, we need to get it done, but like we are setting those suspenses, and we're treating it as because it's all these veterans as if some mythical higher headquarters somewhere is making us do this stuff. We're doing it to ourselves. Like, let's pick the priorities that we really need to like, but let's not like. This is supposed to be fun. Like, let's have some humility. We're not, solving the world's problems as, the big machine anymore. Like we're trying to solve some veterans problems and build a community. So we got to remind each other of that every once in a while. Like, I constantly remind folks, like, I have a bright idea. Like, don't let me
don't just say yes.
Yeah. Like just cause I'm the boss. Like it happened all the time. Like when you become like a senior officer, you got to be careful what you say out loud. Cause next thing you know, you walk into an office and you're like, what are you guys working on? You said that thing about, wearing our boots backwards. So we're trying to figure that out.
I was just talking out loud.
I was joking that you were serious. So, yeah. So there's a little bit of that. But again, I tell people a lot of times, like for my transition journey, I hit the easy button a little bit. Cause again, it is very much military adjacent. I can still use the same acronyms and people know exactly what I'm talking about. There's definitely a whole bunch of people that are service oriented and driven by a mission, which is awesome to be a part of. That's not everywhere you go to work, post service. I can't complain that like for my job, I got to make sure that I stay in shape and work out every day, cause I like working out, but it does like, I got to live the mission, right? I can't, have a bunch of weight on and then tell people that don't sit on the couch, So, I mean, it's pretty cool that's, what I'm getting paid to do. I mean, it's tough. At this level, I still got to, I'm traveling. I do stuff. I'm going to be gone for a week. My wife sometimes is like, hey, you're traveling more now than you did in the Army. I was like, that's not true. I always remind her, I'm smiling now, though. I wasn't smiling all the time in the Army. But but it's going pretty good.
What's it take to get a new chapter started?
Yeah, you need to have a group of people, probably about 6 or more, that are really getting things together. And then we do have a process that someone has to step up to say that they're going to be a volunteer leader, and there's additional training for that person. And ideally, you have a core group of at least 3 of those volunteer leaders, so they can lean on each other in terms of the admin requirements as well as setting up events, putting them on. The way we've set it up is that any member can set up hey, I'm gonna I don't have a chapter on Hilton Head Island where I live, but I put in every run. I joined the running club. And I told the guy that runs the running club, I'm like, hey, I have this veteran thing. I'm putting it in our app every time we do an event that I'm going to be at. If there's someone on vacation or someone just moved here and they're an RWB member, I saw it in the app. I'm going to go do the track run or run the bridge with these guys. So you can do that and get it going. We're leaning back in right now towards the active duty community. RWB blew up in the first 8 years, and 2018 coming off the end of Iraq, Afghanistan's still going on. You had all this energy still. We had this core of folks that started way back, when I started in 2010. A lot of them, most of them were out, and kind of the focus was really let's continue to take care of this core. It wasn't we were still bringing in new people, still doing stuff on post. But it kind of moved to that point of being more of a veteran-centric kind of environment, which was great. Problem is, as you age, you don't have to do as much. Maybe your kids are getting older. They're starting to do their own sports. You get into that second phase and you're successful at that point, and it's okay. You don't need RWB as much. You're highly successful in your second career, and that's taking your time, or, your kids or whatever it is. A lot of times, they'll get through that phase and they'll be like, maybe I need to go back to doing some RWB. I haven't ran in a while. And, so we're there for you. So we don't expect people to be around the whole time. But a lot of our folks are starting to not necessarily age out, but they're not doing as much. They're not as active. And what we're seeing is you got this new generation of veterans or even service members that RWB is open to. And they're I don't know if it's for me. My kids who are captains in the Army. Dad, that's kind of for you and your friends that went to combat, and it's great, but I don't really see myself. I don't see my generation there. So I'm starting to realize, RWB is not going to last if we don't continue to bring in new veterans that see themselves as wanting to be a part of this thing and make it a part of their own. So we're leaning back into that idea of hey, there's 200,000 people in America that take the uniform off every single year, right? And we are just scratching the surface in terms of letting them know about Team RWB, pulling them into the community. We need to get back to the point where talking about your veteran journey starts when you put the uniform on, not when you take it off. Right? At least start targeting folks a couple years out from transition so they know they're not alone. Because that first 90 days is the most critical time for anybody. They're part of the 70% that kind of have it figured out and probably don't need a veterans organization or anything else, or the 30% that really struggle through that first 90 days. We want all those folks to be a part of it, because they're both having those folks in the community is what makes it powerful, right? So we're leaning back into this idea that we got to get back on the posts. We got to get some active duty participation so they know RWB is absolutely yours as part of your community. We're looking to build back some of that strength in the active duty community, seeing some of those chapters come back to life a little bit, bring in some new fresh blood to the environment, so that when those folks transition out, have this gap of missing their community. So that's part of what we're doing as we continue to build for those folks that may have in the last few years kind of fell out. Obvious, like any in-person organization, I think we're really starting to hit our stride again post-COVID. America starts to get back to like, hey, let's get back together. Community's important. Our phones and things aren't all the time. Let's get back to talking to people, being around one another. What better way than going for a 40-minute walk on a Tuesday together, or a run, or a CrossFit exercise, whatever. So that's the goal, is to keep this thing going, build back up. Our high watermark 2018 was probably like 230 chapters. We're like at 150 chapters right now, like they're active. I see that kind of build back up.
The ancillary benefit that I heard you say is that it's not that it's only open to veterans, active or out of the military, but that it's open to community members.
Yeah.
And so the ancillary benefit that I see is if you get yourself embedded with this your last couple of years, yeah, you're already starting to establish that first landing spot.
Yep.
But you're starting to meet people who are outside, and you never know who that one person that you speak to, oh, hey, my brother-in-law has a company, or whatever it is. Just take the opportunity to meet other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to like way back when you're like, who are your mentors? Hopefully it creates an environment too that you have these veterans that have been out there, been there, done that, have been successful through their transition, had the highs and lows. And when you're like, hey, I'm 2 years out, like what better way again to spend, an hour on a Wednesday running with somebody and jogging at a pace and tell me about, I'm getting out. What do I need to know? You have that community ready to support you. And ideally we build it out that we do really good in terms of like, okay, where are you going? Well, there's a chapter near there. Your final, permanent change of station here is going to be, your last PCS. You're still in RWB. You may have taken off that uniform, but you still got this one on. So we're there for you. But having community members is absolutely critical to that, right? Those civilian supporters that maybe have a family member, but most, like, there's a bunch that don't. They just like, this is a cool group of people. I saw them at the local 10K showing up in it's a cool t-shirt. What do you guys do? Can I be a part of that? Yeah, absolutely. It's free. It's free to everybody. But that's the power of it, is it's the power of the community that makes it work.
Do you have big core events that you target each year?
We do. So we try to do one big one a quarter. Right now we're in the month of May. It's it's Memorial Month. Memorial Day's coming up on the 25th. So right now we're doing an event that started on the 1st and it goes to the 25th. And collectively, as Team Red, White, and Blue Nation, we're trying to move 1.3 million minutes exercise or mindfulness, maybe it's yoga, whatever it is that you're doing for health and wellness. We ask you to log that in the app because we want to hit 1.3. The reason why it's 1.3 is if you look 250 years of service and fighting for, liberty, we lost over 1.3 million plus Americans' lives for the cause, right? So we're like, let's move at least 1 minute for each life that was given, 250 years. So we got the whole community trying to do that right now. And it's kind of choose your own adventure. If you're a runner, do your running. If you're going to be at the gym, whatever it is, log those minutes, because those move for a purpose, not just with a purpose, for those folks that, would want you to continue to take care of yourself and have a better life. So that's what we're doing right now. Our next one is in the fall. We always do stair climbs in association with 9/11. So big year this year, the 25th anniversary. We'll have a couple kind of like flagship events at different chapters that we'll have, but each chapter is probably going to do most of them, almost all of them will have their own stair climb this year. We'll do a big one. We just found out we're working with the Mets. They're going to let us use the stadium this year of the week of 9/11, maybe actually on the 11th itself. So we're hoping to make that a big free event for as many people that want to show up and move during that time. Those firefighters were moving on the 11th up and down some stairs on a weighted vest so you can kind of feel what they were doing. This year, we're partnering with another organization right around that same time for a bigger kind of more of an awareness like event. We're asking our members to do local community events as well in conjunction with this, but the 12th of September, 25 years ago, this nation came together. Put aside all the differences, like, let's celebrate that. So I and another veteran nonprofit, they actually are a memorial nonprofit called Wear Blue, Run to Remember. We're going to get together, flag relay, post, go for 5 days, 250 miles from New York to D.C. So the idea of moving a flag forward collectively, celebrating what happened when the nation came together and reminding people, and a little bit of symbology of, first responders handing off that flag on the 12th to the military and military family members who then kind of carried that after what happened on that fateful day. We'll have that event this year. And we usually try to do a flag relay every year at Team RWB in some capacity. We've been doing them for and then around November, for Veterans Day, we do that event is usually a workout. We call it it's like a functional fitness workout of the day, WOD for Warriors. Anywhere between the 1st and the 10th, get together with a friend, maybe an old buddy that you haven't talked to in a while, reach out to somebody, tell some old war stories, maybe move together, take the 11th off. You earned it. It's Veterans Day. And then skipping ahead to next year, our 4th event, which is always our first event of the year, is what we call the Global War on Terror. We celebrate the service of those folks. It's called the GWAT 100. It's the month of February, coldest month of the year. It's the darkest month of the year and the shortest month of the year. The goal is to move 100 miles over those 28 days, about 3.5 miles a day. Most people are like, oh, I could probably do that. You get behind a couple of days, it gets a little harder. So it came out of, there was a nonprofit here actually in California, a guy called it the Taji 100 because he was stationed at Camp Taji in Iraq. They did it for about 10 years and they were sunsetting, actually about 15 years, and they wanted to sunset it, but they didn't want it to die. They supported us with funds raised from that event. They're like, you guys can take it over. We'd like to see the name change. Do what you guys want with it. Keep the event itself kind of going. So we decided, okay, we're going to take it keep it tied to the Global War on Terror. So let's just call it the Global War on Terror 100. Each year we're going to move it to like a different. So we started with Central Iraq because that's where Taji was. We spent months leading up to it telling stories about the guys and gals that served in Iraq, in those areas. Each kind of segment on your way to the 100, it was like a different route or a different like event that happened. So when you hit route Irish was 8 miles long. So when you hit the 8 mile mark, you got your route Irish badge. We did this all via run sign up. It was completely free. So everybody gets the same experience. We make money off of it if you want to get the finisher's medal and t-shirt. We had 25,000 people sign up this year.
Wow.
It's the largest event we've ever had. We're hoping to make it even bigger next year. We're going to move, I think, southern Iraq, next year. It's either southern or northern Iraq. The cool thing is the medals come together to form the country. And then the next 4 years after that, after we get done with Iraq, we're going to move to Afghanistan. We're really focusing on kind of the stories, not necessarily, not talking about the politics, whether we should have been in these places or not, but celebrating the service of the folks that served, all services. We gamify it with these badges and things to entice you. There's a map that a little Humvee drives around to make the 100 miles, that's on run sign up. It's a really cool event that comes together, and we encourage people to do it teams. And there's a leaderboard so you can see who's got the most miles in America on their team, individual leaderboard. You can do it pretty much any modality where if you ride a bike, I think it's 3 miles, that equals 1 mile on the ground. So there's a conversion chart, but you don't want to run it or walk it. You could ride a bike. You could do a concept 2 rower. You could use the Jacob's ladder for 100 miles. I don't know why you do that. Mike Irwin loves doing that, but yeah, it's miserable. I don't know why you do that to yourself. But yeah, that one is an incredible event for us. So those are the big 4. Monthly in the app, we have monthly challenges that celebrate different eras of service. We have the Vietnam battle drill to celebrate those guys. We have the Gulf War chocolate chipper, we called it. Runs that are different lengths at different times. We'll do the a Moog Mile in October for the guys from Mogadishu. Next month in June, virtual challenges, the WAD heard round the world for the start of the Revolutionary War. So some America 250 themed events this year. So those are going on each month. Sometimes the chapters do those together. You can do them virtually anytime, earn your badge, the app. And then along with that in the application, there's digital challenges every single month. Pick from. Some are like nutritional challenges. A lot of it's tied to like generating the behaviors and the habits that you should have to keep yourself going. We're going to have our first ever like sleep challenge where it'll work through like, hey, this is when you should stop looking at a screen. This is when you should turn down your lights, make sure there's no light in your room, turn down the thermostat. Try to help people with their sleep since it's so critically important. So all of that together kind of makes the community of what we're doing event-wise every year.
Do you partner with actual gym facilities to provide service points for members?
So that's a great point. Some chapters do locally. Like the power of the local chapter is like they generate their own kind of relationships. We don't have any like national level support with any chain or anything like that when it comes to we do some stuff with not directly tied with CrossFit, but every once in a while we'll do some shared events to support us. One of our sponsors is GoRuck, since we're such a big rucking community. So, but for the most part, most of our events are like meet in the park, meet, at a track, meet at a trail. So it's accessible for just about anybody, so if they can't afford a gym membership. Now, a lot of our stuff though encourages you to, like I have a Planet Fitness, I go to Planet Fitness every day and I do stuff off the app at Planet Fitness, so we've started a scholarship program for members that if they want to get into the fitness industry, we partner with, there's a great veteran-run organization in Northwest Arkansas, University of Health and Performance. A guy named Matt Hess bought a 500-acre farm. He's building out a campus there. It's physical fitness, it's nutrition. He's now bringing in like vocational schools as well. So like if you want to use your GI Bill, you can go there and get your fitness coaching degree and some nutrition stuff. Now he's bringing in some other vocational stuff because that's so important. It's probably the future instead of college for a lot of people, right? But it's all veteran only kind of situation. If you don't want to use your GI Bill, we offer an opportunity for you to use one of our scholarships with no expectation other than we ask you like, hey, you could be a great Eagle leader, take those skills, make money, go train somebody at a gym, start your own gym, but ideally bring that skill set to the community as well so we can get a little bit more professionalized in what we're offering folks. So it's not just like Sully going, all right, guys, we're going to run for 20 miles today. This is the event. It's going to be awesome. You're going to break all of us. Yeah, I know. It's going to be awesome. So we're trying not to do that. Trying not to do that.
Along that vein, though, and not that this may not necessarily be the specific mission set, but as far as just meetups to where people just get together, grab a cup of coffee,
yep,
not necessarily fitness.
Oh yeah, the guys they have socials. I mean, most chapters have a social at least once a month, if not like get together for coffee once a week. Sometimes it's tied to like, and then let's go for like it's used. A lot of times they tie it after, because they're trying to entice people to do the exercise. But we do that. Some of the chapters will get together and do like we're not a service like a organization like where we're going to do like go clean up the highway or clean up the park, but some of the teams actually do that because they use those facilities in the park. So you'll see a chapter get together and this and help out. Not necessarily like the mission set, but if it brings people together and gets the community going, and gets maybe some hooks in people that then gets them out, working out, we'll do that. So that, there's definitely opportunities for that as well.
What's the website?
So the website is teamrwb.org, and there's a join now button that will take you to either, the Google or the Apple store to download the app. We created our own application that allows you to find our events, those challenges I talked about. It has a little bit of a social media feel on the landing page, so we moderate it so it's all kind of health and wellness. No advertisements. There's no algorithm. You're just going to see who you follow and kind of get a sense of what's going on. There's activity groups. So if you're a cyclist, there's a cyclist group, rucking group, running group, yoga, functional fitness, basically anything that you could be into. There's going to be a small group you could join. The other thing we encourage everybody to do, every member, and there's a group in there for this too. We call it the Big Fitness Goal Group. So every year we tell every Team RWB member, you should pick a big fitness goal that you're going to do in this calendar year. And you should have a 50% chance of not succeeding once you start the goal is, right? The idea comes out of the book, The Comfort Crisis, of having like a misogi of this idea you pick something hard to do. Unlike the Comfort Crisis, we're telling people we want you to announce it to the community that I'm doing this thing. I'm going to do the Couch to 5K. I let myself go for 3 years. I can't run a 5K. I'm going to use that program. I need you guys to help me run my first 5K in 5 years or something. Took too much time for myself since I got out of the service, right? There's other, more crazy ideas that are out there. I'm personally attempting to run 20 marathons in 2026, calling it the 2026.2 challenge. They're not like all sanctioned races, but the goal is like at one given period of time, I'm going to move from start to finish on a route of my choosing. So I've got 6 in so far. I have to do 14 more before the end of the year. It's going to be hard in these hotter months coming up, but we'll see if I get there. But yeah, it forces you to do some things. Like, if you're going to do something as challenging as that, you're going to have to really look after. I'm not flexible. As I age, I have Achilles issues and all these other stuff based on things jumping out of airplanes. So it's forcing me. I'm now doing yoga and doing some different things to make sure that I can recover quickly, because I got to do 2 of these things a month, and so I got to do more, strength training. I got to make sure that my nutrition's right. I'm getting my sleep. So it does force you, if you're going to go for something big, that you got to incorporate that into your life. So we encourage everyone to do that. There's a group in the app. Everyone is automatically signed up in the Big Fitness group when you join. So yeah, go to teamrwb.org and get it going. Yeah, and we'll send you your free red T-shirt. You'll be on the team. You'll feel obligated to start doing some stuff.
Start doing 20 marathons.
Yeah.
Damn. Whew. So as we bring this for a landing, any last pieces of advice you want to make sure people get out there, either about Team RWB or transition,
Sure.
anything?
Well, I think, it kind of sounds like I fell into my transition. I lucked into some stuff, but there was a plan there, right? So again, I think doing some deliberate planning, whatever it is, like that, you're transitioning out of, like, take the time. You're not everything's going to be, not going to fall into like exactly the same thing I fell into. But I tell people that you should plan for failure and then have some contingencies. But I also tell people plan for like epic success, because if you're not prepared to like continue with what's going to go on, you're going to hit a massive high and it could get really bad really quick, right? Because you're going to have to reinforce some success to maintain what you got going on, or at least like, okay, this is good. So don't get surprised when things really work out and you don't have a plan for it. I mean, most people plan for the worst and don't realize you got to also plan for like the best case scenario, because you could lose it really quick. So encourage people to really look at that process. It's not everybody. I mean, it's life. Everyone's going to get the thing that's their passion project number 2 and just as excited every day about going to work like they did when they were in the service. But try to beat the nostalgia. Like, there are better days ahead. May not be tomorrow, but like there are better days ahead. But just like in the service, you got to put in the work. Use the skills that you were given you. You put a uniform on at any time of your life, you were probably a set of skills and built in some resiliency in your life that sets you up for success, unlike anybody else that never did it. like my whole thing is RWB is like, hey man, you're not damaged. You're actually better prepared to handle some of the worst days ahead. Remember that, right? Don't, it's not a crutch. Like that's actually going to help you get through that. So lean into it, find some teammates that are going to help you get yourself out of it, maybe lead somebody else out of it. Continue to rely upon that stuff. I'm convinced, folks that have served are the best teammates in the world, probably the best workers in the world. You're going to give them a complex problem. They're going to say, thanks, that's all I need. Off. Not using half the resources that you prepared them to, use. Like, it's an incredible thing. So, being a part of an organization that's helping folks continue to maintain that is pretty exciting. And again, I just encourage everybody, like, it's completely free. Yes, we're going to challenge you. Yes, we're going to get you out of your comfort level, but it is a service when you join Team RWB, not only to yourself, but to everybody else to be a part of this community. Out people joining every day to be a part of the community absolutely takes people that are passionate about volunteering for one another and themselves to like be healthier. It's all about.
I think that's a big component of what makes these type things successful is that that there's somebody else just like you who's going to be there tomorrow. And conversely, if somebody can rely on you and they know that you're going to be there, that's going to drive them there. So it is still a continued team effort.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story. And
great.
I wish you all the best going forward.
Oh, thank you very much.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do two things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.